wonderful. Oh, you there, my good Hobbit. Let's get a look at you. How are you this fine morning? Goodness gracious. Whatever's happened to you? What's wrong with your face? Where have your textures gone?
Hey there everyone, welcome to my new video about the Tales of the Shire video game. I don't talk too much about Lord of the Rings related material on this channel, but it does come up occasionally. As you can see behind me, I've changed my angle a little bit to showcase some of my cool Lord of the Rings wall accoutrements. And of course, my favorite Lego set, probably the Hobbiton Lego set from the Hobbit An Unexpected Journey line of sets, of which I own all of. I own all of the Lego Hobbit sets that came out for those movies, which is the only line of Lego sets I've ever done that with. Didn't get all the Lord of the Rings sets, got quite a few of them, but not any of the bigger ones. Definitely not any of the newer big ones Lego's done that are like $500. But this is a very special series, world to me, the world of Tolkien, Middle-earth. It's quite wonderful. And this video game gives me an opportunity to delve into that. So thank you for joining me, and let's begin the review. What is up, Middle-earth residents? I am here to talk about the latest Lord of the Rings video game. It's called Tales of the Shire, the Lord of the Rings game. Just in case you were confused which Shire it was, it's indeed the Shire from the world of The Lord of the Rings, written by J.R.R. Tolkien and adapted into film format by Peter Jackson. Pretty clear title there. The menu art does not feature the Lord of the Rings part of the title, but the cartridge does, and I don't really know why they decided to print it on there because you can't read it anyway. Kind of funny, haha. Let's talk about this game. I have had the idea for a Lord of the Rings Hobbit Stardew-like for quite some time. If you look back at my video catalog, you may notice I did an Animal Crossing video where I showed off my town, which I based on Hobbiton from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I put quite a lot of effort into that and had a lot of fun trying to capture the Shire in Animal Crossing format. I had some success. There's quite a few limitations, but I think I did a halfway decent job of it. You know, ever since I first interacted with the world of Middle-earth, I've always thought, the Shire and Hobbiton, that would be a lovely place to live. This game, you know, the premise of it is basically that, is getting to live out that fantasy of being a hobbit in the Shire. This just seemed obvious. All of the activities that hobbits do fit into the Stardew Valley farming simulator format. You got farming, fishing, social interactions with townsfolk, all takes place within a fairly self-contained environment. Beautiful scenery. Really just seemed like a match made in heaven. Someone somewhere also saw the vision, I guess, and hence this game has come to be. Now, the Lord of the Rings and video games have been kind of weird for a bit now. We have the infamous Gollum game, which I should get around to playing at some point, but I haven't. I just can't bring myself to try that. Yeah, that was a real sad situation. There's also a game about dwarves. Haven't looked into that one that much. Don't know much about it. But this is the latest one, and I think leading up to release had the most promise, at least in terms of who was making it, which is Weta Workshop. And if you don't know Weta Workshop, they did a lot of work on both the Lord of the Ring movies as well as the Hobbit movies, a bunch of the props and the sets and all that good stuff. Some of the best of that category in the film industry, in my opinion. So it was interesting to hear that they were going to be developing this game, and that gave me some amount of confidence in it because, you know, it's a known quantity. They haven't made games before, so maybe they were going to be terrible at it, but they had made things of value in the past relating to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. There's some pedigree there, to be sure. So when this was announced, I was pretty excited. Certainly in terms of premise, it's everything I ever wanted from this. It's kind of a dream game. But as more and more footage started to come out, you do start to get a little bit concerned because it looks a little crusty, my friends. Not that much of a looker, especially considering it was slated to come to Switch, which was the
console I planned to play it on. So that was also a concern because obviously a lot of these third-party games don't look that great on the Nintendo Switch, so I was of course concerned about that. There's also the fact that it was delayed several times. This was supposed to come out quite a long time ago, but kept getting delayed. So that was another source of concern. Yet another issue with the Lord of the Rings in general is the rights and who owns it. I honestly don't like thinking about this very much because it depresses me horribly, but the rights to the Lord of the Rings, not the film rights or the video game rights, just the thing itself, all of Tolkien, was bought by Embracer Group, which is this video game company. They seem to be one of those companies that buys up a lot of stuff and then shuts it down. So they're doing really not great stuff just in general, but they're one of the video game villains basically, and they just own all of the Lord of the Rings, which is just bizarre. I don't like accepting that as a part of my reality, so I just try not to. And you know, those original books and movies are always going to exist. People get kind of up in arms whenever anything new is announced regarding Lord of the Rings, because it's not going to be as good as the Peter Jackson films. It's just not, no matter what it is. That's certainly fair, but for me, I do give things the benefit of the doubt if it's related to something I like, even if it's not going to be as good as those original movies or books. That's okay to me. If it's really bad, I just ignore it. I think that's a reasonable way of doing things. Anyway, with that context out of the way, let's get back to the game. So leading up to release, I think I let my expectations get a little out of whack with what the reality was going to be. I thought, okay, they've delayed it this many times, and it's coming from, you know, this studio that doesn't make games per se, but has contributed to things in the past that are of a really high quality. So I let the hopium get a little out of hand. Perhaps that was unfair, but it's just the way of things. And so I did, in fact, pre-order the Nintendo Switch version of this title, the physical version specifically, because I'm going all in on physical games at the moment. I'm not messing around with those game key cards or code in a boxes or that many download games unless it's a download exclusive, something like Tory Saturn or Mind Over Magnet. Small games like that I'll get digitally, but then games where there is a fairly accessible physical version, I will get that. And then I'm just not getting game key cards at all, and also not really getting those games digitally either. Don't really want to support that practice in any capacity whatsoever. Pretty stupid. I mean, no offense if you like game key cards, I just have no interest in them. The Switch 2 just really does not have that many physical games. Fortunately though, this was a Switch 1 game, and so it does have a physical cartridge with all the game data on that cartridge. So that's really nice. And then compared to the digital version, it's not quite price parity, but it's about the same price. A little more, but not too much. So I jumped on that, got a wide release at a lot of major retailers, so it was a pretty big deal when it launched. I mean, relatively speaking, not the hugest deal. Then reviews rolled around. It was about as bad as I could have feared, worst case scenario. Yeah, reviews are really quite low, and there were a lot of complaints about the performance and the visuals and the gameplay, basically the whole package. So that was quite disheartening. And I was like, okay, maybe on Switch 2 there will be enough performance enhancements that a lot of the points these reviews make are moot, but that was just my approach going into it. And so then I had the game in my hand, and I gotta say, just in terms of the box and the physical version, pretty solid. Really like the cover arts. The back art's okay as well. They really shouldn't have printed the Lord of the Rings text that small because it's illegible, so kind of pointless to even have it there and looks messy. But you do get a few bonuses with this physical version, which I do appreciate. But here we get a download code for the soundtrack. That's kind of cool. I like when games do that. We'll get to how the music sounds later, but regardless, it's nice to have. And then the most exciting bonus is this physical map of Bywater, which is the setting of the game. This is just a nice poster. I kind of like it. I think I'll frame this at some point and put it with my other Lord of the Rings maps that I have, because it's just nice. And it's actually useful for gameplay if you want. You know, if you want to use it as a way of navigating around the game environment, you definitely can. I've beaten around the bush for long enough. Now I do actually have to talk about the game. So I got the game on release, which means I got the day one update. So it is possible that this day one update did fix some of the issues that were reported on prior to release by reviewers. Specifically, I saw in the Nintendo Live review, there were complaints about it crashing a lot. And that's one thing I will say about this game. No matter what comes up later about this game's quality, I did not have it crash once. So you can take it to heart that in my experience playing this game on the Switch 2, it has not crashed. I guess it's kind of the bare minimum, but oh well. So starting up the game, it makes a decent first impression. The load times aren't super long. I like the artwork they use for the menu. But then you get into the 3D world, and what a world it is. It's the Shire in all of its glory. Yeah. So there's a lot of detractors with this game visually on Switch, even playing on Switch 2. Playing on Switch 2 does not really fix all of the problems. And those problems become pretty pronounced in this opening cutscene, where things just look a bit off. The texture quality is pretty low. The model quality could also be better. And just the way these characters look in 3D is slightly creepy. The hobbits look a little scary. Gandalf looks a little scary. Everyone has these really pronounced eyelashes, which looks like, again, just kind of creepy. And you're going through customizing your hobbit, and yeah, it's just he's just a weird little bastard, isn't he? I gotta say, my first impression was pretty harsh, and after playing the game a few hours, all this stuff does not bother me nearly as much. So for me, these detractors did lessen the longer I played the game and the more used to it I got. But just starting it up, it's like, it really slaps you in the face that this is not the best version of this game, and made me kind of regret getting it on Switch. I have not played it on PC. I assume it's at least marginally better there, but on Switch, it's a bit rough. The pop-in also is a major issue. Characters and environmental details pop in pretty close to the player, and then the grass and foliage just sort of grows as you walk through it, and you basically just have this ring of grass and foliage that forms around you wherever you move, which happens in some other games like Zelda Breath of the Wild, but it's so much more pronounced here and in such a smaller world environment. This is a very self-contained little section of the Shire, which should not be exhibiting these performance issues. Honestly, it's definitely the most obvious major disappointment of this game is just how it looks. It was a slap in the face for seeing that. I was crashing out a little bit, man. This is, again, kind of a dream game. I've had this concept in my head for years. I was hoping someone would get around to making it, and they did. And there's some good here. There's definitely some good here. There's quite a lot of good, I'd argue, but that first impression is so rough on Switch. It really is a problem. Let's get into some gameplay then, now we've passed that hurdle. The core gameplay loop of Tales of the Shire is as follows. Gather ingredients by fishing, farming, gathering, or shopping. You can sell ingredients at each of the shops, but there is no centralized selling system like Stardew Valley has that box you can drop off produce in. Animal Crossing has a similar system. That's not here. You have to go to one of the shops to sell, which there should have been ways of streamlining that. You then use these ingredients to cook meals. The quality of this meal is determined by the quality of the ingredients and your performance in the cooking minigame, which I will say is pretty fun. You then invite guests to a meal by writing them a letter, which occurs the next day. They will send you letters expressing their preferences the day of the meal. Guests' friendship level increases depending on how much they like the meal. When a guest's friendship level increases, they unlock different things like new spots to fish, new shop items, new meal venues, etc. Repeat. And so this is a pretty decent core gameplay loop. It makes a lot of sense, honestly. There's so much of Hobbit culture obsessed with food. If you know even a little bit about hobbits from the books and movies, that's very reflective of their culture. I think that's just a fun angle to take this game from and gives it a unique focus compared to other games in this genre. I'll now go over some notes I took while playing and point out different aspects of the game. So house customization is included in this game. That's one of the things you unlock is different rooms in your house. There's no gameplay utility to this, but it is fun. There's a decent amount of options. I will say though, whenever you change the texture of the walls or the floor, the time it takes to load that in is quite egregious. I also got to mention that for some reason you cannot close any of the doors to your Hobbit hole. Why can't I do that? I imagine it would get a bit drafty, especially during fall and winter. Why can't I close the damn door? You should probably patch that in or something. Speaking of visuals, there is a photo mode included in this game, which is reasonably fully featured, and I would probably have made use of more if I actually enjoyed the way the game looked more. You also have quite a lot of expressions you can do. This is similar to how it works in Animal Crossing, but these are all unlocked at the start, and you have tons of them. There's a lot of these, and I am not entirely sure why. The only real use for it is your own amusement and if you want to take a photo. But for a single player game, it feels a little excessive. I do gotta commend the name customization in this. You get to choose your own Hobbit name from a predetermined list of names, which are either from the books or sound Hobbitish. Props to that system, pretty fun. The music and sound effects in this game are decent. It's passable, not exactly mind-blowing stuff, but it fits the tone well. So this may shock you to learn, but apparently this game had development issues. Who would have guessed? I would tell you more about this, but the Verge article on it won't let me read it. So yeah, sorry. If you have a Verge subscription, you could check that out. I guess I don't, so sorry about that. The fishing in this game is a little weird. It's fine, but it is definitely too easy. I think I have lost a fish once, maybe ever. It's a little bit brain dead, I'll admit. One kind of neat feature is that birds lead you around Bywater when you select a place on the map you want to go. So that way you don't have like an obtrusive UI mini-map or anything like that. So I think that's kind of a neat feature. Not anything that's gonna blow your mind again, but it's cool to have. In terms of the story, the game takes place between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which is a location that's been taken up by some other video games, as far as I recall, even though the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games are non-canon, they also take place within this time frame. So it just seems like a natural place to set some of this spin-off stuff. The new movie coming out, The Hunt for Gollum, also takes place in this time frame. But it seems pretty near to when The Lord of the Rings begins, based on the appearance of certain characters, such as Rosie, as are some other hobbits that appear in the books. There's some non-canon hobbits, if you want to call them that. They're also characters, as well as one dwarf character who is a woman dwarf, which is not that common. I don't think there are many, if any, named woman dwarves in the books, if I recall. They've been featured in The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power TV show, which I know a lot of people don't like. I get a certain amount of enjoyment out of it. Anyway, not the most interesting character in terms of her personality and the way she talks to you, but it adds some variety, and having one character that's not a hobbit is neat. It's a bit less of a stretch than if it was a human or an elf. I can more envision a dwarf hanging out around hobbits with regular frequency. That seems more plausible. Some book hobbits are also mentioned by name, such as Frodo, Bilbo, and these don't feel too cheap when they happen. It doesn't feel like a throwaway cameo. Mostly this is just a part of the world, and these are known people in this location at this time, so it makes sense that they would come up at times in conversation. That felt reasonably natural. Some of the notes on the map are also written by BB, which is of course Bilbo Baggins, so he contributed to the map a bit. That's a fun little detail. In all, I do think it does capture the feel of the Shire and Middle-earth pretty well. Not much in the way of conflict, but that's pretty accurate for this period. There is some conflict later on in the timeline, if you want to call it that, which you may be familiar with if you read the books. There's nothing even as heavy as that in this storyline. Pretty light stuff. The main storyline is about the people of Bywater wanting to become a distinct village and having to go through the bureaucratic process of that. That feels very on brand for hobbits. Some of the characters are kind of grumpy and have a short temper. You see that in basically any of the books or movies that involve hobbits, is that they do have a little bit of an edge to them. There's a ongoing plot line between two of the families who have had a long-running feud, and you get conflicting stories of how that feud started based on conversations with different characters. There are some fun details to get into, nothing too crazy, but certainly stuff I liked a lot. The NPCs in general are pretty charming. I would say the biggest issue with them is that you don't really get to talk to them unless you feed them food. They basically have nothing to say to you if you just go up and talk to them unless you have completed a quest or upgraded their friendship level by feeding them, which is the only way to increase friendship levels, really. It does feel correct that the only way you can get the other hobbits to like you is by feeding them food, but it is awkward that there's really no reason to talk to the other hobbits ever unless you are actively part of a quest they're in or something. Quests in general are okay. There's not that much variety to the actual gameplay, but it's fine. And then the meals themselves are pretty awkward. There's no talking. You just get these same animations of the characters digging into their meal, and then they decide whether they like it or don't like it or really love it. Fortunately, you can skip this because it gets kind of repetitive after you've done it a while, because at a certain point you're probably going to be wanting to host meals every day to keep leveling up your friendship level with the different villagers. Feels a bit low budget for a game that takes place in the Lord of the Rings world. Speaking of low budget, the lack of any comprehensive voice acting also feels a bit budget. I don't need this to be here, but it does make the game feel a little bit low budget when you have the same canned voice clips playing over and over. So that's not super ideal. The game in general, really, I did start to warm up to it a lot after the first 2 or so hours. When I was first finding my footing and trying to figure out the systems, I wasn't having that much fun. You don't have access to that many meals or ingredients at the start, so you can't really host that many meals. And if you invite characters to a meal and you don't actually have food for them, or you miss the meal date, they get angry at you and you can't invite them for a meal for a couple of days, which is kind of fun. It's a very low stakes punishment for missing a meal. Also, I did just get more used to how it looks, and I was able to appreciate the art design, even if the execution is lacking severely, honestly. The user interface is actually pretty good. I like the way that looks a lot. Menus are pretty nice. The 2D art as well, I mentioned in the menus. Yeah, but once you get into the groove of things and the story's moving a bit and you've got the different side quests you're doing, that's when it really actually does become fun. The initial shock wore off a little bit for me. Another system is farming. It's okay, not the most fun version of farming. You have these little plots of land that you can place in the garden to grow different vegetables and flowers and fruit. The way you grow these is by getting seeds, which you can get at the shop, and these switch out based on the season, as well as other ingredients like fish and ingredients you can forage. So it's okay. It's not inspiring, but it's functional, as is the foraging system. You just go around to different areas of the map. You can look for mushrooms or berries or nuts. Yeah, after a little bit, you will definitely have quite a lot of ingredients and will be able to cook pretty effectively. One thing I noticed is that there is no birthday system in this game, which there is in a lot of other games. Stardew Valley, of course, Animal Crossing. So it would be nice to celebrate some of the Hobbits' birthdays, especially since the focus of this game is hosting meals. So it would make sense if, you get extra points for hosting a meal for a character on their birthday. Of course, the way the Lord of the Rings opens, the opening segment is all about Bilbo Baggins' birthday party, but there's no birthday parties in this game about hobbits. So that's a shame. That definitely seems like a massive missed opportunity. Not that it would have enhanced the gameplay on some drastic degree, but just for having it be set in this world and not including that element. That's a major omission, honestly, which is kind of crazy to say, but yeah. In terms of other penalties that you can get in this game, there's not that many. The only other major one is if you stay up too late, you get carted off back to home by one of the other hobbits. His name is Orlo. You sleep in the next day and lose a chunk of time. Another element of time is that the game is divided into separate times of day. the time of day dictates which meal you host. So you can have breakfast, second breakfast, all those iconic Hobbit meals. That's another aspect of Hobbits, is they have all these meals they eat throughout the day. So it was fun to see that reflected in the meal system. One of the other systems is that little sparkles appear throughout the map. If you walk up to them, it'll activate different scenes where your Hobbit will say something. At a certain point in the game, you also unlock different clubs. There's a fishing club, gardening club, foraging club, stuff like that. This actually improves the game quite a bit once you unlock this, because it makes it so that every activity you do is leveling up this system, and you get different rewards based on how much you level it up. I will say it's a bit slow to level these clubs up. It can feel a bit repetitive. So you go through your misadventures to make Bywater Village. Eventually, you and your friends achieve that goal, which is nice, and Gandalf shows up and you have a festival. So it's a nice way to end the game, and then you enter a chapter of the game called Epilogue, which is basically just everything else. And so in the Epilogue, there is still some to do, but the pace of the game really gets a lot slower. And so that's a problem, because I finished the game in the fall season. And for context, the game starts in summer, you go through summer, then fall. So within 2 of these in-game seasons, I was able to complete the main story. I hadn't even gotten started on winter or spring yet. And that's a bit of a problem, because the pacing up until that point had been pretty good, because the game is giving you enough story content and side activities to do that I was pretty well engaged with it. But after that main story is completed, the pace just really gets a lot slower, because there's just not that much to do, and the things you can do just take quite a long time. So that's just an issue. I don't know. I think some more storylines other than Bywater becoming a village could have contributed to that, because that's really the main point of the story. And then once you reach that point, it doesn't have anything really else to do other than have you interact and continue to befriend your fellow villagers, which is cool. It just makes the pace a lot slower, because there's just not as much to do. There's just a much lower frequency of quests after you have gotten to the epilogue. And I do think those seasons are a bit too long, and the days themselves are, I think, a bit too long. And you can't really end them early, because you have to wait until evening to go to bed. It won't let you go to bed before that. And so the days just get a bit too long, and there's honestly just not enough you can do during the day to fill up that time with meaningful gameplay. Yeah, I think there's just too many days in the season for the amount of stuff you have to do in that season. I do still have fun in, a laid back way, just doing my little tasks. Don't think it's really going to have that much staying power beyond what I have already played, which honestly isn't bad. When you compare it directly to Stardew Valley, it might not stand up quite as well. I did like the visual variety the different seasons provided. That was quite nice. You also get some different music based on the season. The use of music is pretty good. It just comes in every once in a while. It's not constant, which might get annoying or something. So I think we can start wrapping up our review here. I did get a survey pretty recently from Nintendo, and I made my thoughts pretty clear that this game has some issues. I would really love to see them fixed. I think there's maybe not that much hope for this game being fixed, but there's perhaps a little bit. For one, I do think it sold okay, at least. I can't quite tell, but it was #1 on the Switch 1 eShop for a little bit post-release. It's fallen off somewhat steeply. It has not maintained that spot for very long, but it was up there for quite some time, and given the vast size of the Switch 1 install base, it is possible that quite a lot of people do own this game, which I think would potentially incentivize the development team to work on it post-release, which is not a guarantee. Again, troubled development. I don't really trust the large company that now owns the Lord of the Rings and presumably had some involvement in the creation of this game. I don't really blame the developers for the lackluster state this game came out in. I think it's pretty clear from what I played that there's quite a lot of passion put into this project. It just didn't quite make it to the finish line in a great state, which is a shame. With that said, as a major Lord of the Rings fan, and as someone who has wanted a game like this for quite some time, it did tickle my fancy quite a bit. It did give me the Hobbit simulator that I have so desired for some time, in a form that is not as polished or good looking as I would like it to be. But I can't lie to you and say I didn't enjoy playing a Hobbit video game. I just can't do it. Would I readily recommend this? No. But, you know, if you think you can get past the flaws, there is bit of a gem in the rough. Once you get through all the gunk surrounding the gem, there is a bit of a gem in here. But, you know, I wouldn't put it past anyone to say, no, this is really not acceptable, because in a lot of ways it isn't. My major hopes for future updates to this game, which maybe will happen, I think an update for the Switch 2 could really make a world of difference for this game in terms of its visuals. I will say performance for me on Switch 2 was absolutely fine. I didn't notice any performance problems. The fact that it's 30 FPS is disappointing when it looks like this, but in terms of maintaining that 30, it was absolutely fine to my eyes on Switch 2. Apparently, some of the reviews noted on the Switch 1 it did have performance issues. I didn't personally notice that, so in terms of my experience, I didn't have an issue with that. It was really just the way it looked was rough. So anyway, hopefully a Switch 2 version, if it were to be made, could improve those visuals and make it look a little more acceptable. And boosting the frame rate to 60 would also go a long way in making the game feel better. Even on Switch 1, there really should be some sort of update to improve it. It should look better, especially since so many people seem to have gotten it. I could be wrong about that. This is just based on the eShop charts, but it did do quite well for quite some time, so I'd venture to guess it's sold a reasonable amount on Switch 1. So that audience really does deserve a better version of this game, and it's got to be free, man. You can't do a paid Switch 2 upgrade for this for people who already bought the game when it looks like that. You just can't. So if there was a Switch 2 upgrade, I really would not be happy at all if it were to be paid. There's some precedent for it not being paid. A few Switch 1 games do get Switch 2 editions that just are free and just improve the game automatically. And that's really what this game needs to live up to its full potential. Is that too much to ask for? I don't know. The other thing is, yeah, I think there's plenty of gameplay improvements that can and should be made. You know, the game doesn't cost that much. It's not a full-priced game, but it costs more than some of its competitors in this genre. So giving it more meat on the bones would go a long way. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy. Just a few more systems, like I mentioned, birthdays, more story content. There's no romance system, which is kind of unusual for a game in this genre. That really should be there. That's just kind of a staple of the genre that's not here. And maybe some way of going to sleep early during the day. That would also be another useful quality of life feature. As well as more customization options. There's some, but more would be good. You can deck your Hobbit out in quite a bit of different gear. I didn't really talk about that much, but that's kind of a nice feature. I didn't do that all that much. Money's kind of sparse in this game. If you're making a lot of meals, which I was, your money tends to go to all the ingredients and stuff. Flour, that bastard Sandyman price gouging you. So the economy is kind of brutal. A centralized way of selling things, like I said, again, that would be a useful feature. So there's plenty you could do, and I think there's plenty that really should be done, and again, should be free for how this game launched, which is just not ideal and super disappointing. But hey man, I was able to find the joy in the experience. I'm glad I was able to extract enjoyment from this title, because it's something I've wanted for such a long time, and it would have been super disappointing if this game had no redeeming qualities, but it does. I really enjoyed it, honestly, for a lot of the time. The start was very rough, the middle was quite good, and then the post game is okay, but lacking. So that's my review of Tales of the Shire. I don't think I've ever been on more of an emotional roller coaster with my experience in a game than Tales of the Shire. I went from being super excited pre-release to concerned to excited again to horrified by the tone of the reviews coming out about it to devastated by the way it actually looks to starting to warm up to it again to really enjoying it and then to just accepting it for what it is, but also wishing that it was more than what it is. I have a complicated relationship with this title, and I really did need to share my thoughts with the world. It's been a very interesting experience playing through Tales of the Shire. So, thank you for joining me on my review of this game. Hope you have a good one.
Well, my friend, I have enjoyed my time here in the Shire, strange as it may be. Well, I have important business to attend to, and I must be going.